Head of Women's Day, Philippa Kabalikagwa and Lucinda Evans are joining me in studio. They're going to introduce us to a book that tells the stories of 13 different women across Cape Town. It's called Being a Woman in Cape Town. Hello.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hello.
Hi, Jennifer.
So we're going to get right into the book. It's called Being a Woman in Cape Town, Telling Your Story.
Yes.
Tell me about the stories we're going to read in this book.
Well, there are 13 stories of different women. We've got, for example, the story of a woman who was one of the first women Springbok soccer players in the pre-94. We've got a story of a young gay activist. We have a story of a young 18-year-old woman living in Manenberg who did capoeira and who loves Manenberg and says it's a beautiful place. We've got a woman who has one leg who swam across the Table Bay from Robben Island to is it Table View?
Table Bay.
Table Bay.
Yes, swam across for fundraising. So it's interesting stories of normal everyday women who have done interesting things or who have inspired other women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucinda, why is it important for us to read these stories and tell these stories?
I'm one of the women featured in the book, and coming from a community called Lavender Hill, where when people hear Lavender Hill, they hear the bad and they hear the sad and they hear gangs. And our story in the book tells about lavender for the hills, because outside of Cape Town, people don't see that they actually lavender in the hills. And so I've turned the name of my community around, and the work that I do is I try to bring lavender back to the hills. And so I'm very excited to, not just because it's my story working in an organization, but it also shows the broader Cape Town of all the good things that is happening in the community with people. If you look on the internet and you Google Lavendale, you'll just see all the bad stuff. And so I hope with this book that we are also able to be on the internet and showing the good things that is in the community as well.
I want to speak more about your story in just a moment. But Philippa, why don't you tell us your story?
Well, I was chosen as a woman's owner, but also because I'm not originally from South Africa. So I also speak of the immigrant women and the challenges of leaving home and coming into a place where you don't belong. We arrived here in 1993 as the country was changing. And really the struggles of how do you create a home away from home? What have I done to do that? And who have been the sisters who I've found who have helped me in my mothering, in my looking after my children, the challenges of negotiating with home affairs and finding a way. And we're now citizens, but really it's been the story of creating a home away from home. And how do you do that? How do you create? For me, one of the biggest challenges, for example, was bringing my black African children up in a South Africa that was changing and living in a predominantly white area. How do I create strong black role models for them, like I grew up with, so that they don't feel less than, but they understand their worth? And so what have I done to do that? So that's really the essence of the story.
How did you overcome that challenge?
The challenge of looking after my creating. Well, they're interesting. One of the things I did was I insisted that my daughter would only have black dolls before she had white dolls. So I found a black Barbie. I found all sorts of black dolls before she had white dolls. And my husband is a doctor, and we found black doctors and black. Because there are a lot of black professionals. There weren't that many easy to find, but what we did was we made sure we found them and had friends, and we would invite them over and we would expose our children to those people. And what we often did also, because we didn't come here as refugees, so we had our work permits, we made sure that every 2 years we went back home to Uganda so that our children would experience Africa in a different way from the way it was spoken about in some ways in South Africa, and so that they could grow up knowing where they come from, knowing the beauty and the strength of the people they come from, and yet also try and help them find roots in South Africa. not an easy challenge, but an intentional.
What do your children say now about the way they were brought up?
It's interesting because my daughter's now in her early 20s, and now we're having interesting conversations. I mean, she would tell me, for example, how challenging it was when we told her we are Ugandans and we're also South Africans, and how going home to Uganda, she didn't always feel like she fitted in because her accent was different. The Uganda I spoke about that I grew up in wasn't the Uganda she would see, because we'd gone through a whole economic war there, and so the roads were dilapidated, and she struggled to bring the two together. And in school, you know, like she loved acting and so on, but she never ever got the main part because she didn't have blue eyes and blonde hair, and she struggled with that. And yet also she's grateful for the fact that she did have those strong role models, and she does have those connections. And now she's, I think, quite comfortable with being a Ugandan and being a South African, and she has roots in both countries. She goes to Uganda every year, December. She saves up to go.